Hey everybody, thanks for coming by. Today is the day. We are making our tomato sauce for our pizza class on Saturday. Saturday's going to be lots of fun. We're doing two of our favorite things, pizza and Negronis. Two incredibly simple things that doesn't need a lot of time or effort, but when they do it right and they do it at home, there's nothing better. Speaking of that, let's talk about sauce. You don't have to do this. You can buy a sauce. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Get a can, get your favorite style. We're going to put it on whatever pasta you want, whatever pizza you want. That's totally okay. You do you. Totally fine. That being said, if you want to make something a little bit better, this is the recipe to use. I love this recipe. We developed this recipe for the bar, for the restaurants. Right now we're using it for our meatballs and for our chicken parm. It's incredibly simple. It does seem like there's a lot going on right here, but it's all about steps. And that's the big thing when it comes to tomato sauce. This is a Sopranos episode. I'm not going to bust out a razor and shave my garlic, because you know why? I don't like doing that. Sorry. Instead, let's take a look at our ingredients. All right, so this is everything we're gonna need to make our sauce. This is our ground tomato. I'm a huge fan of San Marzano and 7-Eleven. It's a style of tomato. It's natural, it's picked fresh, and then ground. It's beautiful. And this is, again, we're making a sizable batch. So you wanna cut this recipe in half, feel free. So we have our tomato, salt, chili flake. This is Korean chili flake. I'm a huge fan of Korean chili flake. It's got a little bit more heat to it and a little bit more depth. Some ground garlic, which for those of you who know a little bit about me, this is how I love to make garlic. Fresh garlic, nice and dry, salt and olive oil, and it lasts forever. Ground garlic, onion, and carrot. Our Italian seasoning, some tomato paste, sugar. This is some leftover parsley that I had from in the fridge, so we're gonna go ahead and add this to this sauce, because why not? Same thing with the basil. This basil's looking a little wilted, so we're gonna cook it into the sauce and get some of that nice flavor. Homemade chicken stock, and then red wine. So all these things are gonna come together and make a wonderful sauce. So let's move on to making Soffritto. All right, let's talk about Soffritto. Soffritto, otherwise known as mirepoix, it depends on how you want to look at it, is basically a ground or chopped vegetable medley that's a base for a sauce or a stew or whatever you might be cooking that requires a little bit more backbone to what you're making. So what we're going to do today is we're using these three items to make our Italian Soffritto. There are, like, the Holy Trinity is, typically bell pepper, onion, and celery if it's down south, in like New Orleans kind of area, or the French from actual traditional mirepoix is carrot, onion, celery. Same thing with the Italian. The Italian also has garlic in there as well. So today I'm using carrot, onion, and my ground garlic. I would use celery, but I don't have it. No big deal. So I'm not going to use it. And it's really simple. All we're going to do is grind these together or chop these really fine and mix them together. That's going to make the base for our sauce. I'm going to use a Roku or a food processor. If you do not have a food processor, no big deal. A nice sharp knife and a little bit of extra time is all it takes. The reason why I'm using a food processor, though, is because I really want this fine. I want this as almost like mashed at this case, because what we're going to do is when we're going to cook our sauce, we're going to cook our Soffritto first. We don't want the color. We just want it to melt, basically. So all that wonderful flavor from the garlic and the olive oil and the onion, the carrot, is all going to meld and be a backbone of extra flavor to our tomatoes in our sauce. That being said, so if you look, my carrot is definitely a lot more than my onion, and my garlic is just about half the amount of onion, if not 3/4. I like more carrots in my Soffritto personally. That's just me. You may not, some might disagree. But you know what? You're watching my video. This is how we do it. So my carrot is trimmed. That little bit was for salad earlier today. Thank you, lunch. And this little top was just a top piece, so it got a little wilted, so we cut it off. I'm not peeling it. No peel. Peel has tons of nutrients and tons of great stuff in there. Also good flavor. So all we're going to do is rough chop this, okay? If you're not using a food processor, you're going to want to try and cut this carrot as small as possible. So that way, when we go to cook our sauce, it gets nice and cooked down without caramelizing or getting burnt, which is the last thing you want to do. There's nothing worse in the world than burnt tomato sauce. Worst thing. So I'm just doing some rough chops of my carrot right into my processor. My basic basically half of a medium-sized onion. Again, nothing fancy, just enough to kind of chop it up a little bit. And then lastly, well, almost lastly, I should say, my garlic, a little bit of olive oil. Now, you don't have to do garlic like this. You can just throw in whole cloves if you want to. This is just how I process garlic for my home and for the bars and restaurants that I work in. There is nothing better than getting a secondary product from garlic, because garlic is one of the most amazing things in the entire world, just like chicken. It's incredibly versatile, has a lot of cuts, and different ways to use it. So now I'm also going to add some herbs, which you do not have to do either. But I have a little bit extra parsley, so I'm going to add some parsley that I had floating around that I might as well add in for flavor. And something that I don't normally do. This is a basil. This basil is starting to get, like I said before, like a little bit wilted. But I don't want to waste it. It still tastes beautiful. It still smells great. So instead of just chopping it up and throwing it in my sauce, I'm actually going to put it in my Soffritto to really kind of get it ground up. Basil hates knives. Hates knives. It hates bullies. Anything that's really heavy on it. It doesn't like it. I'd rather be tearing this up and tossing it something if it was nice and a little more fresh. But the fact that it's, like I said before, it's a little bit wilted, I'm just going to rip it up and throw it in my Roboco. Alright, let's grind it up. Nice and fine. Rubber spatula, best friend. Give it a little scrape. Now this makes a good amount of Soffritto. I'm probably not going to use all this for the recipe. I think the recipe only calls for this size. The recipe only calls for a cup, a scant or a heavy cup, not a scant cup. So, but if you want to add the whole thing, you could add the whole thing. I like to save a little bit. I may want to make something else later. The addition of the olive oil with the garlic helps really puree this the Soffritto up. Let's take a look so you know what I'm talking about. Nice and ground. We're going to give it maybe another 5-10 seconds or so. We'll do one more scrape, and we'll call it a day. Awesome. So now, we have our Soffritto. Just going to scrape it out into the little bowl here so y'all can see. This is why I love a rubber spatula. $1 million tool. Every little bit counts. Don't want to waste anything. There's still some more in here, but I'll scrape the rest out in a minute, I promise. So that is our Soffritto. Back up a little bit there. So this is going to be the base for our sauce. Speaking of that, let's start the sauce. First thing we're going to do is we're going to cook down our Soffritto with some olive oil and some red wine. Let's do that first. All right, so we are set up and ready to go to make our sauce here. So we have all of our mise en place and our accoutrement that we need to make our sauce right here in front of us. We have a thick bottom pot, which I'm using my Le Creuset pan because I love this thing. Thank you, Gwenny. One of the best Christmas gifts ever. And if you notice, I have the top of a large can that I have here. The reason why I have this is because I have gas burners, right? So my gas burners make a direct flame right here in the center. So if I want to cook the sauce and make it nice and stewed, what we're going to want to do is kind of redistribute that heat a little bit more. So by adding a small metal plate to where our flame hits, it's about medium-high heat, it's going to help really just redistribute the heat around on the bottom of our pan. Is it overkill? Is it unnecessary because this is a thick bottom pot like a Le Creuset pan? Probably, but it's what I like to do and it makes me feel better about doing it. That also being said, I wouldn't use anything aluminum to make a tomato sauce. Tomatoes are high in acid, and unfortunately tomatoes do pull acid out of our metallics out of things that are aluminum, so it might turn your tomato sauce gray, and we don't want that. But enough science, let's cook. Olive oil, a relatively medium body olive oil is what I like to use. We're gonna use about 1/4 cup. The California stuff's pretty good. I kind of like this. It's relatively neutral. Now we don't want this sauce I'm sorry, this olive oil to get too hot, because if it gets too hot, it'll end up breaking down and end up smoking, and then the olive oil won't taste very good, and we don't want that. The whole point of us doing this is to make it taste good. So we're gonna give this about a minute or so to get ready. While we're waiting for our oil, let's take a look at what we got. We got our wonderful Soffritto that we just made. A wooden spoon, because I like wooden spoons more like metal spoons. Tomato paste, this is about 3 ounces. Some dried Italian herbs. You do not have to use dry Italian herbs. You can use all fresh if you'd like to, but I really like dry Italian herbs. Dry herbs kind of get a bad reputation. You just need to make sure you're staying up on your stock. You got to make sure that you are checking them every few months, and don't buy in large quantities like I accidentally do sometimes. But I cook a lot, so that's totally fine. All right, we're gonna put our hand above our oil here. Feels pretty good. I don't want to add a Soffritto. I'm gonna have it like crazy amount of heat and source right now. We're just actually gonna add about half of this. It's just, yeah, a nice soft sizzle. That's what I like to hear. This is what's considered a heavy cup. Awesome. Like I was saying before, we don't want to caramelize this. We don't want to put any color. We just want this to have a nice little bath in the olive oil. We're gonna let it cook down. While this is cooking, we're gonna add our Italian seasoning. It's gonna help hydrate these Italian herbs and pull out some nice flavor. And we're also gonna salt this, not a lot. We're basically gonna salt this twice, in the beginning and in the end. That's really it. And the only reason why we're gonna salt it right now is because we wanna pull some of that extra liquid out that's in those vegetables. Small pinch. This is a 3 finger and a thumb pinch. Just enough. We can make sure every little bit gets it. A little touch more. If I had to put a amount on it, I'd say probably a teaspoon worth of salt. Smells good already. I'm gonna turn the heat up just a touch. I like to kind of balance it back and forth. I like Crusade is like using a cast iron pan. It retains a lot of heat, so you really kind of have to baby it once in a while and kind of bounce it back and forth to maintain a proper temperature. Scott, can you just put this all in a crock pot and let it cook? That's a great question. Yeah, you could. Absolutely. You could take what I'm doing right now with the Soffritto vegetables and saute them quickly and lightly in a saute pan. Add all these ingredients to your crock pot and let it sit overnight, and you've got wonderful tomato sauce. You don't have to sit here and baby it, but I like to do that kind of thing because that's who I am. So this is looking pretty good. Some nice bubbles going on. It's got some good color. Excellent. So the next couple steps we're going to do is we're going to add our tomato paste, our chili flake, and our wine. All right, we're going to do it in that order. So let's talk about tomato paste. Tomato paste is awesome because it acts as a natural thickener. I'm not adding any roux. I'm not adding any like butter or dairy and like that. There's no flour involved. We're using concentrated tomato. But here's the kicker when it comes to tomato paste. If you were to take this, take it out of the bowl, put it into this, and add all of our other ingredients and start making our sauce, there's going to be a strange metallic taste in the back of our palates because, like I said before, tomatoes are acidic and they pull out metallic flavors from metal objects. Tomato paste is stored in an aluminum can. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we cook out the tomato paste for at least 3 to 5 minutes until the aromas really kind of break down and all this Soffritto kind of pulls together in a binding sensation. This looks great. It smells awesome. It didn't take very long at all. Nice change of color. We're going to use all this tomato paste. If you don't have tomato paste, then don't put it in. Don't worry about it. I like to take my cans of tomato paste, divide it up into 3-ounce portions in like little Ziploc baggies, and freeze it. Pull it the day before you want to use it, or a couple hours, and you're good to go. Nice. All right. We're gonna let the tomato paste cook down for a little bit. Chili flake. We're gonna do about a teaspoon and a half. You can actually measure it out. I'm just gonna actually eyeball it. So for me, that's a teaspoon, and that's half. Now, obviously, the more you add, the spicier it'll be. And you don't want to make, if you want to make a Fra Diablo sauce and make something incredibly spicy, knock yourself out and add some more if you'd like. But I like just a little bit of kicking the teeth in the background. I don't want to overpower the sauce. I want just to know, like, hey, I'm there. I'm hanging out. So our Soffrittos come together lovely. Looks like a nice, almost looks like andouille, like a spreadable salami. It looks great. So while that's cooking, we're turning down a little bit. We're talking about the wine. So we're gonna use red wine to cook this down. Again, the reason why we're adding this stuff, we're doing these things in layers. Layer, 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 layer. Every layer adds flavor. Every layer adds structure to this sauce. It's not just straight tomato from the can and add it onto something. But again, if you want to do that, you absolutely can. So what I'm using a Bordeaux wine, which I really like for these kind of things. It's a light-bodied wine, but it has lots of flavors. But honestly, you can use whatever wine you like to use. A good rule of thumb when it comes to cooking with wine, if you wouldn't drink it, don't cook with it. That's really about it. Now, that being said, if a wine's been cracked and open for a little while, and it's not necessarily like you want to pour this wine and drink it, you can still cook with it. That's not necessarily what I mean. If you don't want to drink some, $2 Chuck wine, then you probably wouldn't want to cook with it either. Awesome. So the cooking process for the tomato paste, we're about a minute or so in, which is great, starting to smell awesome. But we're also going to count that time with the wine. We're going to add this wine, and we're basically going to deglaze our pan. Any kind of like little caramelized bits that have been in our pan are going to cook off and into our Soffritto. And we're going to cook this wine down until there's basically nothing left. It's going to be kind of dry in the bottom. There's no fire, no big bubbles. That means our temp is in a good spot, in a good place. We're burning off the alcohol. We're fortifying the flavors. I'm gonna turn this down a little bit. You don't want to spit on you. I'll put a top on it just so that'll help keep the kitchen a little cleaner. We'll get back to it in a second. All right. Our chopped canned tomato. You can use any tomato you'd like to. Like I said, I'm pretty partial to a couple different types. I'm a big fan of San Marzano in any type of fashion or form that they may be in. Peeled, ground, whole ground, with basil, whatever you want. As long as you like it, that's all that matters. It needs to be customizable to your flavors and to your tastes. This is a good amount. All we're gonna do is dump this in to our Soffritto when we're ready. We'll give it about another 60 seconds or so. It looks pretty good. And it already looks pretty dry. The fact that I'm able to move my spoon all the way across and very little liquid comes back means we're looking pretty good. Plus it makes the house smell amazing. We make sauce like this probably every 3 days, depending on the time of year. Meatballs have been on our menu since day one. Chicken parm was on our secret menu for a little while, and then it made its way to the actual menu. But I will be removing it for the summer and doing something else. But chicken parm will always be available as long as we have the ingredients in-house for it. Just like anything else, the longer this sits and the longer it cooks and the longer it chills out, the more flavor it gets. Like, we're gonna cook this today, but I'm not using this until Saturday. Today is Wednesday when I'm making the actual recipe. But the longer it chills out and the longer it kind of bleeds into itself, the more flavor it's gonna combine. And that's all we're really worried about. We wanna build flavor. All right, this looks great. It's been about 3-4 minutes. It doesn't smell like raw tomato anymore to me. It just smells like a medley of smells. I'm getting all the herbs. I'm getting good garlic. Lots of good red wine smell, like that deep, like a really well wine has been like breathed really well, decanted really well. Nothing smells raw. All right, Rule of thumb, turn the flame off. We add the rest of our tomato and do it in one go. If you sit here and try to pour a little bit and pour a little bit and pour a little bit, try not to make a mess. You're gonna make more of a mess. Just dump it and dump it away from you. Excellent. So we have 2 more things to add to this before we let this stew for about an hour. Like I said, the longer the better. So we're gonna stir all this up to get all that nice Soffritto really well mixed into our sauce here. Nice. You'll see the color change. It'll turn a nice deep ruby red. That's what we're looking for. Last 2 things we're gonna add is I'm gonna add about 1.5 teaspoons of sugar. And this is an optional step. You don't have to. If you like your sauce sweeter, add more sugar. You don't like it sweet at all, don't add any. Sometimes it depends on the tomatoes. Sometimes the tomatoes, they're picked in season, or if you're using a lesser product, sometimes they're kind of tart and kind of sour, and you need a little bit of sugar to cut through. But I like a little bit of sugar to help round everything out. And then last, for right now, is our homemade chicken stock. This is a triple-bodied stock, which you don't have to do that, but this is how I like to make my chicken stock with the fat included. This is a 1/2 cup. So when I say triple body, what I mean is I make chicken stock like anybody else would, and that can always be another class if people like. I will make my stock normally with bones and chopped veggies and some aromatics and herbs and let it cook for a couple of hours or overnight. But then what I'll do is I take that stock and I will make another batch of chicken stock out of that stock and do a double fortification. So instead of using water, or at least all water, I'm using chicken stock and then a little bit of water to help kind of flatten it out a little bit to reconstitute and really pull out a lot more flavor from that second round of chicken bones, fresh stock altogether. And then I'll do it a 3rd time to make a nice, deep, dark, concentrated stock. Something that you can just drink straight and be really satisfied, or add to dishes that really give it a little bit more backbone. Now, why chicken stock in this? Because I have it, and I like it. And a little bit of extra liquid is going to help really kind of make the sauce nice and creamy and delicious. You can use vegetable stock. You can use beef stock if you want. You can use fish stock. I mean, I wouldn't suggest it, but that's just me. What we're going to do is we're going to turn our flame back on. We're going to let this bad boy go down to about medium-low heat. We're going to put our top on, slightly cracked, just enough for a little bit of air to escape. We don't want it to reduce too much, and we also don't want it to sit there and just kind of pump its own moisture back onto itself. We want it to come down a little bit. We're going to reduce this probably by a 1/2 to a solid 1/3. And we'll check back on this in about, we should probably stir every 10 to 15 minutes. So it's a good place to set a timer. Set a 15-minute timer and set them down. And we'll let it go for about an hour. If you feel like it needs a little more time, we'll let it go for another 1/2 hour, and that's when we adjust the seasoning. So I'll see you all in a little while. Alrighty, so it's been about an hour and a half, stirring at 15 minutes or so. Just when I kind of think it's about time. You can set a timer if you'd like, if it makes you feel a little bit better about losing track. Sauce looks great. It's come down a good amount. It came down probably about 2 inches or so. So by having the top kind of cracked, it's allowing the steam to escape so it can kind of evaporate and the sauce can reduce down. And obviously the longer we let this go, the better it's gonna be. This is a nice color right now. It's a good ruby red, really nice and dark. This is a lovely tomato sauce just to use as is, but I'll probably let this go for at least another hour, if not a little bit longer, just on real low. We don't want this to be crazy dark or crazy concentrated, but I'm just looking for it to be a little bit thicker. And again, the longer something cooks like this and the longer something stews like this, the better it is. Like if you're using a crock pot, for example, at this point, there's probably a good amount of steam build up in your crock pot. You might want to crack the top a little bit, depending on how long you let it go for. It also depends on the type and the brand and how strong it is. But all we're kind of looking for is a feel and a consistency. Taste. Tasting is incredibly important. Mmm. Mmm. It's delicious. But it still needs time. It doesn't taste raw, and that's really, really key. The fact that it tastes, for me right now, I'm tasting the body. It tastes really nice and earthy and herbaceous, and it's got some sweet notes to it from the tomato and a little from the sugar. Really small iota of heat in the background. It's really, really well balanced. I really like it, to the point where with the salt right now I'm not going to bother adding any, at least not right now. I'll let the natural salt kind of do its job. Because what we're going to do later is we're going to use this as a base. It might be a base for our pizza. It might be a base for a bolognese sauce. It might be a base for a tomato soup. It all really depends. But we don't want to over-season anything, because all we're really trying to do is balance our flavors and balance everything that we end up putting onto our dishes too. We only actually taste 5 things. We don't taste vanilla. Like, that's a smell. It's an aroma. So the taste you taste are sweet, sour, bitter, salty, and umami. Umami is like that meat kind of flavor, like mushrooms and steak and like that kind of fatty goodness. It's a flavor. So I'm sorry, those are tastes. So if you are able to balance those 5 tastes in the dishes that you are making, so one aspect's acidic and one aspect's salty and one aspect's sour, once you balance those 5 tastes, anything you make will be incredibly appeasing to your palate. So that being said, this sauce is looking great. I would not say it's done. Like I said, I'm going to let it probably go for another hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours tops. And if I wanted to, I could probably put this thing on real low, almost like a whisper of flame, and let it go all night, depending on how you feel about that. And that's it, guys. Very, very simple. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, and I can't wait to see you Saturday. Keep cooking.